Hi everyone, I'm Stacy Clark, and today we're going to be talking to one of the country's go-to lawyers in the regulated cannabis industry. Yes, we're going to be talking about the business side of marijuana and hemp. My guest, Bill Roark, is the founder and co-chair of the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Medical, Marijuana, and Hemp Law Committee, and he was one of the first lawyers in the Commonwealth to become an early and major player in this area. He has a national practice representing businesses including growers, manufacturers, distributors, and as well as individuals and smaller entrepreneurial businesses who want to stay in compliance with the law. Bill does this all out of his home base, which is in Montgomery County, with the esteemed law firm of Hamburg, Rubin, Mullen, Maxwell, and Lupin, where he chairs its cannabis law practice. He's known as a business and regulatory lawyer that solves problems for his clients in real time. Not only does he head up one of the first and arguably most substantial practices in this area, but he's also an adjunct professor of law, teaching drug law and policy at both Villanova and Temple Law Schools. And it's a true labor of love for him to do that, and we'll get into that in just a minute. So I'm so thrilled to have Bill today. Let's jump right into this. As a young lawyer, what made you get interested in marijuana and hemp cannabis law?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Stacey. That
Sure.
was very kind, and I'll be mindful on how I answer this question, knowing that my mother may be watching. Honestly, although this industry is relatively new, this is something that has been on my radar since I was in law school. When I was in second or third year of studying, there was a story on the news, this is in 2004, back-to-back press coverage about same-sex marriage and legalized cannabis. And I remember having a conversation with my now wife, then girlfriend, saying, it'll be curious to see which of these, forward-looking ideas get to Pennsylvania first. And somewhat in an offhanded way, the comment was made, well, at least if cannabis comes, there'll be an opportunity for you to explore it and tie it in with your career. With that, the seed was always sort of in the back of my head. So as a result, you would hear a story, you would see an article, and as such, you would want to read more about it. In 2014, I believe, Pennsylvania Senate passed a medical marijuana bill for the first time. Mm-hmm. And it served as an indication that this was actually going to happen. This wasn't something that we were considering. It was here. And so at that point, I looked at what opportunities were available and how we could help people in Pennsylvania that wanted to explore this industry or benefit from what it might bring. So with that, we looked at law firms out west in Colorado, in Washington, and California to see what it was that they were doing, what legal services presented once this industry came to your jurisdiction. And it was like a light bulb moment where their needs were identical to what it was that our firm was already excelling at doing. There were corporate needs, there were land use needs, there were administrative agency needs. And our firm had decades of experience doing that. So with that little comfort in the back of my mind, I went to my managing partner and said, I have a crazy idea. And I held my breath. I wasn't sure if I was going to be politely shown the door or if I was going to be told to explore this. Admittedly, it wasn't, it didn't come out of left field, I could say. My desk is ordained with a few Jerry Garcia bobbleheads, and I would say the artwork on my wall probably gave a few indications that this idea might have been percolating out there. All the credit in the world to my partners and everyone at the firm. They stood behind the idea full throttle, and we find ourselves today in the very fortunate position of helping, I think, some of the best people and companies in this space.
I understand you found a real way to add value to all these projects. Can you talk about that for just a moment? How you stayed in your own lane and more?
Yeah, and that's a good way to put it. It's important, I think, in every avenue of life to know what you're good at and stay and focus on that. Mm-hmm. So when Pennsylvania's program turned the lights on, so to speak, we took a look at the application process and said, all right, what are companies that want to work in this space going to need to do in order to get the ticket to operate, the permit?
Right.
And so what we did was we looked at all these things that the state was going to require of them, and we identified areas that we could help them out with. So for example, operators in this space with their applications needed to submit evidence that they were in compliance with a local zoning ordinance. We knew that we didn't necessarily have the experience at the time to advertise a robust cannabis practice. It was brand new in Pennsylvania. It would have been disingenuous for us to say, we can do that.
Sure.
But at the same time, we also knew those people coming in don't necessarily know the nuances of Pennsylvania zoning law. We do. We can help them with that. And so we were able to come in and say, we don't want to know how your secret sauce is made. We don't want to become your general counsel, but we know that there are some items here that we can really help you with. And we did. We found ourselves going across, the finest parts of this Commonwealth, attending some of the most thoughtful and heated debates in high school gyms that you could ever imagine, and trying to educate everyone as to what this industry really looked like. And doing so in the context of obtaining local zoning approval was our way to show the industry that we have an actual value that we can add to them, but at the same time go to our fellow Pennsylvania citizens and say, whatever you thought this industry may look like, whatever stigmas you may have out there, they need to be dispelled because in reality it looks a little bit different.
Okay, that's great. So from a layperson's standpoint, which would be me, what's hot out there? What kinds of problems are you helping businesses and entrepreneurs solve?
And that is one of the unique and enjoyable elements of this practice is the problems are never ending, I ought to say, and often they're novel. When I teach at law school, I tell the students, unlike your other courses where you have a case book, where it has 400 pages of case law that dates back 100 years, that doesn't exist in the cannabis industry. So when a problem comes up, it is often presenting itself in a novel setting for one of the first times. So it enables the lawyer, in my opinion, to do what we were trained to do in lawyer, to think of what the solution ought to be and try to find a good way to get there. Our hands aren't necessarily tied by 50 years of precedent, so to speak.
Right.
So for example, the problems that pop up now, you can divide this industry into two separate but equal spheres. The operator side, and then the people that are getting their hands dirty, growing, producing, and selling it, they have their own universe of problems. Every year when the tax bill comes due, there's going to be struggles with how is it that these industries go about paying their taxes in an industry that is federally illegal. The federal government says you can't do this, but every April 15th they say, where are the taxes?
Yeah.
So those are, given where we are right now in the calendar, that's on the top of a lot of people's minds. What was also eye-opening was that the issues that are presented to an operator, someone who's growing or producing, are very similar to the same issues that any other company might have. It just so happens that this company's not making widgets, this company's growing cannabis. So they have contract disputes. They have disputes with their landlord. They have disputes with employees. It doesn't come as a great surprise. They have disputes with their regulating agencies in a universe that the rules are so strict and so regimented. You are constantly in a friendly but sometimes adversarial give and take with the regulating agency. So every day when I open up my email, I have no clue what problems are going to come up. And every day is a surprise, but you have to come up with a way to address them and do so efficiently and creatively for your clients.
What are some of the agencies that regulate this area?
Primarily in Pennsylvania, the medical marijuana program is
Right.
run by the Department of Health.
Okay.
The hemp side is run by Pennsylvania's Department of Agriculture, which can present for someone not necessarily well versed in this a little bit of a headache, because you have two plants that I could put in front of you. They would look identical. They would smell identical, and they would grow at almost the exact same rate. But the laws that apply to each of them are markedly different, and the agencies that are responsible for enforcing those laws are markedly different. And what's even more terrifying is one plant can come the other plant simply through the maturation process because of the chemical profile. But that's a conversation for surely another day.
Wow, okay. Well, tell me about some of the work that you're doing that involves individuals, entrepreneurial businesses, patients.
And that is admittedly where the cannabis industry has many more intersections with other avenues of life. The business side of it is a finite universe. There's only so many operators in the space, and their problems are, although similar to others, they're unique to them. When you now look at how cannabis is impacting an individual's life, the patient, for example, the problems magnify and multiply exponentially. For example, you can have an individual who has been treating for a chronic pain with an opiate therapy for his or her entire life, and now has a doctor say, we're going to recommend a new course of therapy for you. And that patient, it comes from all walk of lives. If you go into a dispensary, it does not look like a scene out of Jay and Silent Bob's. You're going to see a lot of retirement age patients. And that presents a problem where they're now getting information from their doctors that is admittedly contrary to what they've been told their entire life. Don't do this, it's an illegal drug. Now we want you to try it for your back. So the patients automatically have questions about the legality of this because they know, wait a minute, this is still federally illegal. How will that impact me as an individual if I take something? Mm-hmm. The first place they look is their employment. Will I lose my job because I'm now taking medicine?
Yeah.
And the analysis for that is different for every profession, honestly. The General Assembly in Pennsylvania wrote the law in I think a unique and fascinating way that gave the patients from the starting point protected status, that you cannot be discriminated against simply because you are a medical marijuana patient. Makes sense. That's a good starting point. But at the other side of the coin, they also realized you're now asking a whole bunch of people to be comfortable with something that they haven't been comfortable with for their entire life. So I think an appropriate and great amount of discretion was then given to the employers to say, okay, if my job deals with, let's say, public health and safety, then I should have some discretion to limit my employees' job duties. I don't necessarily want someone who is going to be treating with medical marijuana driving on a daily basis. Even if that patient treats with a sublingual drop every night to help them sleep, they'll wake up the next morning bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and stone-cold sober.
Yeah.
But if they were to get pulled over by a police officer and they have been treating with this THC medicine, it will be in their system. They'll have enough THC in their system to kill a horse, but they'll be stone-cold sober. So you have this irreconcilable intersection between, let's say, criminal law, employment, and cannabis law that presents a lot of questions from the individuals because they want to make sure that they don't lose their job, but also from employers, whether it be a company that employs 100 people or a company that employs 5 people.
Sure.
They very likely have an employee handbook that addresses a drug-free policy. They may be working in a building that has a mortgage on it. And that mortgage, Stacy, may say there's no illegal uses in that property. And if someone is in there treating illegally, then they violated the term of that mortgage. So the intersections for the individual, like I said, are to a magnitude of 10, greater than for the operators. And it's fascinating, just like it is for the operators, to see the constant ways that something like this can cross your desk.
I see how your phone must be ringing off the hook, and I can see how every day is a new adventure for sure. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, do we need to address just for a second consumer safety concerns and criminal concerns?
Well, I think we would be remiss not to. The consumer safety angle is one that hasn't been entirely explored yet, and that is because this is a new industry. But just like any other product that is going to be out there and ingested by patients, you could run into some problems. And it's particularly important when you consider, again, I mentioned the two different types of plants. There's a robust testing requirement for this type of plant, but there's an entirely different testing for this type of plant. And that puts the consumer in the perilous position of not necessarily knowing what he or she may be ingesting.
It really does.
It is. And one of the emerging areas that you see, again, we have the good fortune of having a bit of a crystal ball. We call it California, right?
Oh.
We just look out there and say that hopefully, is an indication of how things may go in some areas, not others. But if you look out there, that is becoming an increased problem. And you're seeing consumer class action lawsuits brought against producers, for example, who advertise that their hemp-based CBD product has certain health benefits. A bunch of people buy that product and it turns out it didn't have those health benefits. The law provides those consumers an avenue of recourse. So just like any other product, the cannabis industry is learning that it needs to be careful about the representations it makes.
Sure.
And making sure that the patients out there are safe. And universally, the operators that I deal with want that challenge. They welcome that challenge because they know with greater testing, with greater transparency comes greater confidence. And the greater the confidence, the more the consumer is going to be inclined to purchase your product again, and you develop that brand loyalty. The criminal intersection is a problem. It really is. And
in short, yes.
Yeah, there's no way around that when you have a substance that remains federally illegal. When my clients call me, the first thing that I need to tell them is this remains federally illegal. You are breaking the law. Period, hard stop. I mean, there's no way around that. There's a fascinating, nuanced legal discussion as to why, even though you are violating the Controlled Substances Act, the federal government lacks the finances and the budget to come after you. But that doesn't mean you're not violating the law. So absolutely, people that are operating in this space and people that are treating with medical marijuana find themselves constantly in a perilous and questionable criminal situation. Again, the THC, which is the intoxicating ingredient in marijuana, stays in your system. I think the safe assumption is, let's call it 30 days. There's data that goes a little bit one way or the other to that, and different testing methods can test it longer. But you could have a patient, like I said, the retirement age grandmother who treats every night with sublingual. She treats it, it knocks her out, she gets a great night's sleep, and grandma wakes up bright-eyed, bushy-tailed.
Right. If
she's been treating for a few weeks and gets in a fender bender, if she were to get tested, she would have THC in her system, and under the current crimes code in Pennsylvania, she could be prosecuted for driving under the influence.
Is that happening?
You don't see it. I mean, good facts make good law, right? And if you have the grandma that gets in a fender bender under the circumstances that I just presented, chances are the police officer's not going to have any reason to believe that she would be treating. But you find yourselves with a less friendly set of facts in a less friendly jurisdiction. The laws are there that say if you're driving under the influence, then you can be punished by law. And I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that should be the rule. The question, though, is when will the science and the law catch up to the industry.
Yeah.
We have an understanding that there's a defined blood alcohol content.
Right.
That when you have alcohol in your system, you may not be impaired until you get to this certain level. You
Right.
can have a glass of wine and drive home. You can't have a bottle of wine and drive home. We don't have that in the cannabis industry. There's not a test that I'm aware of that is accepted as valid and reliable by law enforcement agencies to say, all right, this is how much THC is in your system, and this is the impairment level. The science isn't there yet.
And you've taught some of these criminal folks, law enforcement. I mean, what kinds of questions do they ask you? I'm curious.
Everyone genuinely wants to understand it. And again, you're asking not just law enforcement officers, but township managers,
Right.
borough officials. You are asking them to change the way that they have enforced the laws in their municipality, and doing so takes some massaging. We weren't able to just come in there and say, the law says we can do this, we're going to do it. Mm-hmm. We wanted to make sure that everyone knew what it was that this industry looked like. What will a dispensary look like? If you've been in them, often it's closer to a CVS than it is what you might imagine if you've been to someplace in Colorado or California. There's going to be a pharmacist on site at all times. So educating the law enforcement officers, educating the borough officials, we found to be a critically important tool, because it made our job easier than when we were representing people that were impacted by this industry. If we were speaking with someone that had an accurate and modern understanding of what this industry looked like.
Well, briefly, where do you think we're headed? What might be some of the things that you see in your California crystal ball or otherwise?
Well, the pick your favorite phrase, the toothpaste is out of the tube or the horses are out of the barn. The industry is only going to be going one way, and that is an expansion. There are plenty of smart people that have looked at this that have their own opinions. I am less confident that we will have some giant monumental federal legislation move the needle. I think given the temperature of the country right now, I don't see that happening, and I don't necessarily think it needs to happen to accomplish the goal. The problems that are impacting operators in this space can be solved with a scalpel instead of a nuclear bomb. I mentioned the tax codes. You could see changes in the federal tax code easing some of the burdens that my clients face. You could see amendments to the Bank Secrecy Act to increase financial services that are available to operators in this space. You could see an amendment to Pennsylvania's criminal code to maybe present some level of an affirmative defense to patients, that if you get pulled over, you have a positive test, it's not an open and shut case. You can present evidence to say, I wasn't under the influence, it was simply in my system for treating. So I think looking forward, what we'll see are these small, nuanced moves of the needle, so that 5 years from now we look back and we say, how the heck do we get here? It wasn't one big move, but it was a bunch of baby steps that got us here.
Incrementally, yeah, I see. So we've got just a couple of minutes left. I want to better understand why you teach, why that is such a love of yours, and then get to 2 takeaways that you'd like the audience to have.
One other note just on where we are going forward. I would be remiss if I did not mention the serious and I hope ultimately successful efforts that Pennsylvania's General Assembly is making to expand our program to adult use. We can do that, and there's a lot of momentum, a lot more momentum than has ever been there.
Known as
before.
Recreational use.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
I'm always a fan of the term adult use. No one calls it recreational drinking. I'm not going to the recreational liquor store. But,
I cut that out of my vocabulary.
Yeah, it's 6 to 1, half dozen another. Teaching, my mom was a teacher, so I always thought it was something that would pique my interest. it was the intellectual curiosity that cannabis law afforded me that really encouraged me to practice in this area, right? When a problem came up, I didn't have to go look up the answer. It was, you had to think through the answer because it hadn't been decided yet. That ties in, I think, to the academic interest of then being able to explain that to other students. It's remarkable that I find myself in that position. I never believed I would. I was a good student. I wasn't a great student. I wonder what the law review guys are thinking now that I'm going to be walking those halls as a professor. But it's fascinating to teach not only the nuances of this law, but also the ability to be creative in your thinking. And that applies not just to law students, but the individuals that this industry attracts are people that are comfortable thinking outside the box, are people that are comfortable risking a lot more than, well, every entrepreneur risks a lot, but when you put yourself in this line, you're really going out there.
Yeah.
You're going to have your friends and your family asking you questions.
Yeah.
You're going to have the stigma, although it is diminishing, that is still somewhat out there. So working in that space and being able to teach individuals about that was always something that appealed to me. So I'm thrilled that I have the opportunity to do that.
Wow. Okay. So what do you want to tell our audience before we have to go?
How much time do we have? No, this is absolutely an area where if you have a question, call a lawyer. Because there are areas where you can fake it to make it, but this is not necessarily one of them. If you want to operate in this space, the rules are out there, you need to follow them. Call a lawyer, they'll be happy to talk you through it. If this is impacting your life, whether through the employment phase, the patient phase, one of your coworkers, you have rights out there as well. Pick up the phone and call a lawyer, because this area of law is filled with landmines, and knowing where they are is important so that neither you nor anyone near you gets hurt. The second thing I would say is, and this was something that my mentor taught me. He was full of pearls of wisdom, I suppose is a fair way to say it. He taught me that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And when he said that, you just hear it as some quirky thing an old man says. It goes in one ear out the other. I have found myself fortunate enough to know now what that meant. I work with some of the best people in this industry. I address, I think, some of the most compelling legal issues that come up. To me, other people may be bored out of their gourd with this stuff, but for me, I absolutely am thrilled that I get to work with individuals and find a way that we are helping them. We are finding a way to add value to what it is that they want to do here. And in the grander scheme, if that includes helping an industry in Pennsylvania grow that wasn't otherwise here, then we're all the happier to do it. So being able to help and work with great people in an industry that I love has really, I feel exceptionally fortunate is a good way to put it.
Well, you shine when you talk about it. And folks, if you need to talk to an attorney in this area, and I would recommend the one I'm sitting with, of course, because he has so much information and his ear to the ground on this, you want to contact Bill Roark at W. Roark, his name is spelled ROARK, at hrmml.com. If you go to Hamburg Rubin's website, you will also see how to contact Bill by email and by phone. So today was utterly fascinating. I'm going to go back to my office now and find you the next best lawyer in another area. So until next time, it's been great. Thank you.